Okay guys, I hope you recovered from our little yawning experiment last time. I had to yawn for the rest of the day. Actually, once you start looking at social influence, you see it all over, right? You see it all over. Just yesterday I had this experience, there was this fire alarm and people where I live, people ran out on the streets, right? And then other people, they ran out of the streets not because there was the fire alarm, but because there were other people running out on the streets, right? So then they thought maybe others know more than they do, right? And that's sort of this idea of rational imitation, which makes sense. I was sitting there in my apartment thinking, should I really bother? It is most likely it's a false alarm anyway. I don't know, somebody overcooked something and it's going to be switched off any second, right? But then there was sort of, I looked out and I thought maybe those guys out there know more than I do, right? Maybe those guys saw some smoke. There was no smoke, there was nothing, right? I didn't see anything. I couldn't smell anything, but I thought maybe those other guys do something. So you see how social influence actually really is in the center of our lives, right? And that's one of those things that fascinates me sometimes, how people can do sociology without thinking about these kind of things. It's we are very social creatures, right? So our surroundings, we are embedded in our social context. We are much more affected by it than we maybe would want it to be, right? In the whole context of social inequalities and so on, we are the product of our environment to some degree, and we also are incredibly influenced by the people around us. Sometimes on a very subtle level, like me making you yawn last Tuesday. Okay. Today we talk about something else that is fascinating, I think. It's self-fulfilling prophecies. Self-fulfilling prophecies. Yeah? Essentially stuff that is not true, but because everybody believes it is true, it becomes true. That's the lecture in a nutshell. Yeah? Okay, so what I will do, I will talk about self-fulfilling prophecies first, what they are, and I will walk you through some examples, so sort of what is the logical sequence here? How does it actually happen? Right? And then we will look at self-fulfilling prophecies in groups. Well, just as add-on, because this can happen in the individual level. Think of the patient getting a placebo medication, right? The patient thinks it's actually working. Thinks he feels better, does more sport, he becomes better. Right? But it can also happen within groups, and there the bank run is going to be the classic example that you think that your bank goes bust, everybody goes to the bank, withdraws money, and as a consequence the bank goes bust. The bank was perfectly solvent before, but when everybody goes there and withdraws their money, the bank is insolvent. Anyway, and then we move on to the self-fulfilling prophecies. Actually, then I have two more in-depth examples. So first one, self-fulfilling prophecies in educational context. And that's actually where these things really do matter. Yeah? And people came across that, and it's actually scary when you realize how much these things matter. If you know it, you can actually play it to your advantage. So actually, I will tell you how I'm playing this to my advantage with my first years. So actually, I pranked you guys already several times. I pranked them as well. Yeah. So I used the self-fulfilling prophecy to actually make them become better. Then there's another example about hit ratings. So there we kind of follow up on the stuff that we talked about last time. Remember the music lab thing? Yeah? Social influence, where people kind of got influenced by whatever other people thought is good music, right? And then they kind of jumped into this as well. Well, actually, there I will talk about an extension that they did with that experiment, where at some point they kind of artificially flipped the ratings around, and then after that you actually see how those songs that they artificially made more popular actually became popular, right? While the other way around as well, while the songs that actually were popular to begin with, but they made them artificially unpopular. By just faking the number of downloads that they had, that they assigned to this song, but then actually this song received fewer downloads after that. So again, that's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy, where things that are actually not true at the beginning lead to some action, or actually false beliefs about stuff that is not true, lead to some action, and the action eventually makes the belief come true. Okay, then a little bit about why self-fulfilling prophecies occur and how we can use it. Yeah? and it is being used, and clever managers actually use it. Okay, so let's talk about self-fulfilling prophecies first. What is a self-fulfilling prophecy? Well, when you look into the literature, you find it under different names as well. Sometimes it's called the Oedipus effect, or bootstrapped induction, or Bayesian performity, or maybe you heard about the Pygmalion effect. That's sort of often, sometimes there are slight differences, but mostly they describe the same thing. Here's a definition from Robert K. Merton. He's one of those big figures in analytical sociology. I'm not sure if you came across him already before, but he's sort of a big guy. Actually, when you are in analytical sociology and when you go to this conference and stuff, there's the Robert K. Merton Award that is being given away. Was it 2 years ago? I was in the committee, so I had to decide about who should get the Robert K. Merton Award. That's sort of for the best publication in this field. And he gave us a definition of the self-fulfilling prophecy. He says a self-fulfilling prophecy is a false definition of the situation, evoking a new behavior, which makes the original false conception true. So false definition at the beginning of the situation, invoking a new behavior, which eventually makes the false definition, the false definition of the situation come true. So that's sort of the setup that we have. We have these three elements. We have false belief, leads to some action, which eventually leads to the belief coming true because of the action. Two refers here to the second element. Okay, so it could be, now I'm introducing X is a person, Y could be a person as well, P could be whatever, I don't know. We'll come back to that in a second, but the outline here really is there's a false belief. X believes that Y is P, while in fact Y is not P. Whatever that is, we come back to that in a second. I have some examples where I walk you through that with examples. Then because of that, X does something. There's some action. Here I call it B. And because of this action happening in the second step, Y eventually becomes P. That's sort of, just put it in another language, that we have a false belief which leads to some action which eventually, because of this action, makes the belief come true. Okay, now let me walk you through that in an example of education. I come back to that later on again, but now let me walk you through that to explain the sequence here, right? So now let's put in the blanks. So now let's say X is a teacher, Y is a student, P is having great academic ability, and B is paying attention to the student. Okay, so how does this look like? So in the first instance, right? Now I'm just plugging these things in. X is the teacher. The teacher believes that the student is great, right? While in fact the student is not great. And that's actually how I'm fooling myself sometimes. And actually it does work. It does work for the benefit of the students. So the teacher believes that the student is great. What happens then? Well, now let's plug in the second thing. Maybe then, when the teacher believes that the student is great, the teacher puts more effort in dealing with the student. Right? When you're dealing with somebody you think is smart, you're not going to tell them stupid things. You're going to take them serious. Right? You pay time with them. You put effort in dealing with them. Right? Okay. So now we have an action happening as a consequence of a belief that was actually false. Right? So let's imagine that the student was not that clever to begin with. But the teacher put effort in it because the teacher thought that the student was clever. Okay, and then in the next step, you see, I don't know what can happen here, and that's actually exactly what people found in studies, that because the teacher puts more effort in spending time and paying attention to the student, I don't know, preparing course material, responding to questions or whatnot, the student becomes better. The student becomes great. So that's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy here. Let's see. Okay. Well, this also happens just at the individual level, right? I don't know. Now I was actually talking about pairs. There's the student and the teacher here. There's sort of a false belief. But when you think about medical studies, or you all know the placebo effect, yeah? That you're given something, being told that it helps you, but in fact it does nothing. Yeah? You're given a happiness pill, you're given a clarity pill, and suddenly you become happy and you feel completely clear in your mind, right? That's a self-fulfilling prophecy when that occurs. Yeah? Let's walk you through that, how that can happen. So now I'm plugging in these different things again. So now X is the patient, Y is a drug, and P means now improving health, and B is living a healthier lifestyle. So now I don't have two players here. Now I just have one individual, right? X being the patient, but Y is now something else. That's sort of the drug. Okay. So now it could happen, it could happen, not to say that these things do happen, but these things can happen. That's sort of when these self-fulfilling prophecies unravel. It could happen that the patient believes that the drug improves health, while in fact the drug is a placebo. Yeah, it does nothing. Then there could be some action following from that. Well, what could be the action? Well, that the patient thinks she feels better and does more sports because of that. Yeah? I'm feeling great, so energetic. And I have the energy, let's go and do some more sports. Right? And then in the next step, you can see how this action, doing more sports, can actually make the original belief come true. So that then because of more sports, the health of the patient improves. Again, that's sort of the sequence, that's sort of the sequence, the causal sequence that we see in self-fulfilling prophecies. And they already realize that the cause and effect are not that, that's actually what people don't get. Right? So they mess these things up with each other. Sort of what is sort of the cause and what is the effect of things. And when you look at the real world, often it's actually not that clear, right? What is the cause and the effect of things? And that's sort of when these things can happen. Okay, what do we need to have? What do we need to have a self-fulfilling prophecy, or to talk about a self-fulfilling prophecy? Well, there's this guy, Michael Biggs. He was one of my former advisors in England, and he basically says, okay, there need to be two things here, so that we can actually talk about a self-fulfilling prophecy. That's a definition he makes, which I think is useful. He says, first of all, we need to have a causal sequence, like the ones that I just outlined before. Right? We have a false belief. Then we have some action resulting because of that false belief. And then because of that action that resulted from the false belief, the belief actually became true. Right? So that's sort of the sequence that we need to have. And second, he goes into detail again. There needs to be some misunderstanding here, right? That people sort of get something wrong. If people know exactly what the beliefs are, and there's no mistake at the first instance, then it's not really a self-fulfilling prophecy. So there needs to be this mistake in people's understanding of things, and that actually happens all the time, right? That happens all the time. How many times do you I don't know, are you wrong in interpreting a situation? Yeah? It can very easily happen. Like yesterday, when I was looking out of the window and saw those folks standing on the street, then I thought maybe they know something, right? But maybe they didn't. Probably they didn't. Yeah, that's sort of why eventually I didn't walk out, because I had just read Rational Imitation by Peter Hedstrom the day before, and I had talked to you guys about social influence. So I thought, fuck it, those guys, they don't know it better. Yeah? They are just following other people around them, and I won't. I'll just keep sitting here in my sofa and do whatever I do. Yeah? And eventually, it was probably stupid. I shouldn't tell you this. When there's a fire alarm, go out. Yeah, do that. Don't do what I did. Anyway, so there needs to be this false understanding of the situation, and that can happen very, very often. And people, that's not necessarily that people are stupid, or that they kind of sometimes there's just information missing, right? You don't really know. You cannot really appreciate, is this sort of now really true or not? You know? And then people often act because of these beliefs that they have. We believe we are limited. That's sort of what Herbert Simon meant when he introduced the term bounded rationality. Right, we are bounded within the things that we see, the things that we don't have information about everything in the world. right? We can't have that, but we are bounded in what we see. Herbert Simon actually won the Nobel Prize, and there we within that we do as good as we can. Yeah? That's sort of what we do. Within the knowledge that we have, or with the knowledge that we have, we do as best as we can, and then we follow from that. And there's another guy, actually, who it's one of the reasons why I ended up in sociology. You know, actually, funny story. You know, I studied completely different things before, and at some point I switched, made a career change, and here I am in sociology. And one of the things why I switched was I came across this work, or actually I had this idea by myself first, and then I rediscovered that somebody already had this idea 100 years ago. Yeah. It was a little late, but then I also realized that it was sociology, yeah, which is something I didn't know before. I had no clue what the hell sociology is, and then I realized, okay, maybe that's not a bad thing. Maybe I'm on the right track here. And what I'm talking about is a quote, or let's paraphrase it. I first thought that it doesn't really matter if something is really true or not. It doesn't really matter if something is true or not. As long as you believe in it, it's sort of the same thing. Yeah? It's sort of the same thing in the consequences for what you do, right? If it affects your behavior. So the guy who had this idea was funnily called William I. Thomas. You know, my name is Thomas. And the damn thing is called Thomas' Theorem. So I thought, okay, at least it has the right name. Yeah. And, quote, Thomas' theorem is, if men define situations as real, they are real in their consequences. If men define situations as real, they are real in their consequences. What does it mean here? That kind of people act based on what they believe is true, right? Not that everything, you know, but when you believe in something, it will become true, but kind of when that is sort of your perception of the environment around you, you will use that information to make your decisions, right? So when you make a mistake at that level, right, or it doesn't really matter if it's true or not, as long as you perceive it like that, you will behave, or your decision-making process kicks in with that information, right? Maybe sometimes you know that you don't really know things, right? That's under different things, but sometimes you actually think this is actually true, this is sort of how the world looks like, while in fact it's not. And that's sort of where a lot of these, I don't know, mind games happen, right? Where you think that something is true, or you think that, I don't know, you know, the other day, last Sunday, I was at a market somewhere, and there was sort of a magician, yeah. And you know, they play all these tricks with you by making you think that something is true. And then you do something according to that, while in fact it's not, and the whole thing rebels over. Anyway, so Thomas' theorem, a little side note here. Let's come back to the self-fulfilling prophecy. And actually, Merton, in his article about self-fulfilling prophecy, he talks about William I. Thomas as well, and his theorem that he had. But now let's go back to the self-fulfilling prophecy. So we have people sometimes failing to realize that it was, as a consequence, that it was their false belief, or that it could have been their false belief, which made them do something which eventually made the belief come true. Right? And if people don't notice that, then they feel validated at the end. They say, I told you so. Right? I told you so. While, in fact, they were not. Right? Well, when I'm an educator and I want you guys to be better, I don't care if you believe or if you don't believe that you are great, as long as it leads to the consequences and you will become great, I'm absolutely happy. So you see how you can actually already dwell on these kind of things and use that, and or how you need to be, next time when somebody tells you, I told you so, and you realize, you spot the situation, it was a self-fulfilling prophecy, you can tell, listen man, this is a self-fulfilling prophecy. Okay, so I have a little question in between. So we talk about these dynamics here and how they kind of attach to each other, you know, and then eventually lead to something. So now, one of the things here is, okay, now let's say in Ireland, you know, people drive on the left, you know, it still confuses me. I still haven't driven a car here yet, yeah. And now the question, so obviously there's some dynamic here, right? So people drive on the left because others drive on the left, obviously. Right? I don't know, if I would drive on the right now, suddenly I would have a problem. So now the question is this a self-fulfilling prophecy? Driving on the left-hand side of the street, is this a self-fulfilling prophecy? Hands up. Yes. I'm not raising my hand, so don't wait for me. Who thinks this is a self-fulfilling prophecy? Who thinks this is not a self-fulfilling prophecy? Oh, you guys are good. This is not a self-fulfilling prophecy. This is a self-enforcing convention. This is sort of a different thing here. Why? Remember the two criteria that Michael Biggs introduced. There's no false belief here. But everybody knows that kind of. I'm not wrongly assuming that thinking that people drive on the one side while they should on the other, or so on. Right? But it's a self-enforcing convention. We could have as well decided as a society to drive on the right, right? Or I don't know. But we converged somewhere, and the more people adopted a certain behavior, the more beneficial it was for everybody to move into this direction. And these are also very fascinating things. Maybe I should talk about this another day. I don't know. Where we come together on certain conventions, while we could have come to completely different conventions as well. Right? Maybe some of you guys remember. Oh, it's so out of date. Blu-ray players. Yeah. Who has a Blu-ray player nowadays anymore? Nobody. I don't have one. You don't need one. You just stream stuff. You have a Blu-ray player. There was also, was it HD player format? There was another format, which is actually superior to the Blu-ray format, right? Or many years back, videotapes, VHS, and there was another format. Yeah? We could have moved into the other direction. But because so many other people already moved into this one direction, then it paid so much more for everybody else to move into this direction. Or when you look at the keyboard that you type on your computer, right? The layout of that, it's the QWERTY layout. Different countries have slightly different layouts, and that always messes me up because I buy my computer in French Canada, I live in Sweden, and computer thinks I'm German, and it's a nightmare with finding the right keys. Yeah? But anyway, the general layout of the QWERTY layout, that's again a convention like that. There was sort of a self-enforcing convention because then some people, or it was introduced, and I think there are even studies that you can design a keyboard in a much more efficient way. Right? But now we don't switch because everybody uses that keyboard. And everybody is used to that keyboard, right? To that keyboard layout and so on. That's sort of fascinating stuff, and actually I'm starting to think more about writing about these kind of things. Anyway, so this is a self-enforcing convention. Now let's move this a little further, right? So we talked about self-fulfilling prophecies with just individuals, the placebo effect. I think that this medication helps me, then I feel better, right? And actually there are studies that show that there's, what is it called, reactive, there's a specific term for a physical reaction that people have when they think they get a medication. But there's really something happening in your brain when you think that this helps, like with painkillers and so on. You give people a fake painkiller. You tell them they got a painkiller. Well, you have to deceive them. That's the important part. That's completely unethical. So we cannot really do that anymore. But people used to do that. They told them this is sort of what the drug does, but it didn't do it at all. And then people really started believing it, and they kind of got a physical reaction that was measurable. Okay, now let's move this away, from just individuals and the two-group example of the student and the teacher up to groups. Yeah? So and that's sort of maybe you came across self-fulfilling prophecies in that context, where it's not just two individuals that are involved here, one having a false belief, but kind of many different people having false beliefs, and those people enforcing their false beliefs with each other. Okay, so now going back to the logical sequence that we have. So now, we have again the same thing. We have a false belief. That y is p, and then because of that, x does something. Does b. Okay, but now we have another individual that kicks in. Yeah? Now we have another individual that kicks in, and because of somebody else did something, this new person, x2, now believes that y is p. Right? While in fact it's not the case. Right? And then x2 does something as a consequence of that. Yeah? And then it can lead to yet another person seeing that, now two people do something, so there really must be a big danger here because there's so many people outside on the street, right, looking out, and then with every person that kind of goes out on the street more, I was actually, seriously, I was itching. I was thinking, should I go out now or not? Maybe those guys really know something that I don't know. And as a consequence, you can have this sequence of events. Eventually, Y becomes P. So eventually, the thing becomes true. Okay, again, I'm going to walk you through a little example to make this clear. The classic example here is the bank run. That's the bank run. That and that happened. That happened in the 1920s, where small banks just got busted because of rumors, because somebody thought that the bank has financial troubles or problems, and then everybody ran there, and eventually it did happen. And actually, it's still even nowadays, when as long as people believe that a company is doing bad, they will sell the stocks on the stock market. Then the stock drops, and then other people might think that the company has problems because others sell the stocks, and eventually the company might get into serious trouble because their market value really drops down, right? And whatever, their bonds or something are associated with that. So this is not an old thing that doesn't happen anymore. It still happens, and So bankruptcy, that's sort of the idea. So let me walk you through that. So now let's say, okay, X1 is now a person, your X's are all persons, that one person believes that the bank is insolvent, for whatever reason. Maybe it's a mistake. But actually, it's another very interesting thing where I've been thinking about, and colleagues of mine have been working into this direction, that sometimes making mistakes can trigger these cascades of events, right? And actually provide us an explanation for what actually happened. Which is a very different kind of thinking about mistakes and randomness and error, right? Because often we kind of want to get away from that. We want to get to the systematic part. We want to rule error out, randomness out from our analysis. But sometimes actually what causes it, or what can trigger these cascades. So for whatever reason somebody believes that a bank is insolvent, right? So what does this person do? Well, this person withdraws money from the bank. We come back to that in a second, why the person actually does that. Okay, well, and then there's somebody else who actually hears about it, or who sees that another person withdrew money from the bank. And now a second person, X2, believes that the bank is insolvent. Why, that's still not the case. But this person saw somebody else running to the bank and taking away money. And then the second person does that. And then this can lead to the third person, and so on and so forth. You see where I'm going with that. So even though originally the bank was solvent, right, had no financial troubles, it can lead to the bank having financial troubles. And that's actually how it nowadays works. If I don't know which bank you are, if everybody would go to the bank and withdrew all their money, all the banks would go bust, right? Because they don't have that much money, right? That's so how the whole system works. They kind of play with the money of others in a way. So they don't have their own capital to. If everybody at the same time would go to the bank and withdraw money, almost all banks would immediately go bust. Okay, so that's sort of the classic example. Let me walk you through another example. Actually, I have two other examples now. One of the classroom thing, and the other one was the hit ratings. So there was this study about the self-fulfilling prophecy in the classroom. So there were these two guys, Rosenthal and Jacobsen. They studied self-fulfilling prophecies in a classroom. So what they did, well, nowadays impossible because of ethical boards and whatnot, but what they did, they gave teachers, that was sort of a high school, they gave teachers wrong information about certain students. They gave them the information that some of their students are actually highly gifted. They have a high IQ, but they are just a little late in their development, but they are about to spurt. So they are about to explode and to realize their full potential. So that's sort of what they told some teachers. So the teachers believed this was based on an IQ test, but it was completely random. So there's sort of a false belief that was given to the teachers. At the end of the year, that's the crazy part. That's sort of where, I don't know, where when you know about that, you can try to fool yourself with it and kind of use it to your advantage and use it in settings like this. At the end of the year, those kids where teachers thought they had a higher IQ score, but in fact they didn't, actually they improved their IQ scores. Yeah? And they actually continued to do so for the next 2 years. They skyrocketed in their performance. So the belief became true. How did that happen? How did that happen? Well, they looked closer into this, and the prophecy came true because the teachers responded differently to the students. Sometimes this happens in a very unconscious level, even when you're aware of these kind of things. It happens in an unconscious level, right? Kind of teachers responded, paid a little more attention, explained a little things more here and there to the students. Didn't just put them away thinking, oh, they're stupid anyway. Right? So the teachers responded differently. A second element that we had now here is that the students started to react to that behavior of the teacher. Right? That's a constant dynamic thing. And again, that's something that fascinates me. And once you figure that out, you realize that you see that all around you in your life, about how these dynamics actually play out. Sometimes on a very unconscious level, where then people react to others. And here the story is that, and studies have showed that, when you kind of when you raise expectations, right? And even though this might be wrong, students might feel that they don't deserve this attention from the teacher. Right? That's actually what they showed. They showed this in the setting of the Israeli army and so on. Right? That they're soldiers who receive a lot of attention, although they didn't really were not that good. Right? They felt they didn't deserve it, and as a consequence, they kind of tried to reduce this discrepancy between the expectation and the actual behavior. So they actually got motivated and put much more effort in it, right? And as a consequence, they actually improved. So this is sort of something that happened here in this case of the classroom studies as well, that students eventually improved. They reacted to the behavior. So it's a bit like this inception idea, yeah, that you can play here. Kind of when you plant the seed, yeah, that's what they did here. They planted the seed that those students are gifted with the teachers. Then the seeds sort of started to grow. The teachers behaved differently, and which led to different feedback, which ultimately changed the behavior of the students and actually made them improve. Yeah. So here we have the sequence, and that's sort of the stuff that we already talked about at the beginning. The teacher believes that the student is great, the teacher puts more effort in dealing with the student, and because of that, the student actually becomes great. Okay, now the self-fulfilling prophecy, now I showed you actually how this can be, this is great, right? This is a real-world application, how we can actually use this stuff. But this can actually also work in the opposite direction. This can also work in the opposite direction. When you tell students they are stupid, they will be stupid. Yeah? Or so the example that in the literature is here. Robert Merton, 1948. Remember, the states, they were highly segregated for a long time until the 60s. It was a big thing over there. And he noticed that actually educators at the time believed that blacks are inferior. That's sort of what I thought that was there. While obviously that is not the case, and obviously it was not the case, because of that, educators put fewer funds into the education in black communities. Right? That was the action that followed from this false belief, which eventually led to a worse education, right? Which actually gave blacks worse access to education and then less possibility to realize their potential, like others. Right? So there you see how it actually can go into a negative self-fulfilling prophecy as well. Okay, I have one other example of coming back to the cultural market studies. That's kind of the stuff that we talked about last Tuesday, yeah, and it basically really picks up on the music lab stuff that we talked about before. So remember, there was this experiment that I talked about, Matt Zalgranik, Peter Dawes, and Duncan Watts. They created this artificial website where participants could listen to and rate and download songs by unknown artists. And they had over 16,000 people participating in this, and they controlled all the conditions in this virtual world. Right? That was sort of the key contribution there, that they controlled all the condition in this artificial world. Okay, so this was sort of the setup. Remember, people went to this website. They could listen. They could listen to the songs, and then eventually they had to rate on or download, which is sort of a good song or which is sort of a bad song. And then, their the experimental design was, they kind of rerouted half of the people into the social influence condition, where they told them about what others had thought and what others things are good songs. Yeah? Okay, they had these different roles. Here we are. That's sort of just a little repetition from the last time. Okay, so now they did another experiment following based on that, where in this social influence condition, right, where people were told about what others thought what are good songs, right, they actually flipped these ratings around. They inverted them. Yeah? They artificially, they said, okay, there was one song that they knew it was the most downloaded song, but then they kind of exchanged the number of downloads this song had with the least downloaded song. And they just had at one time point, they made a cut and said, okay, here we are. Now they flipped those information around, and then they looked at how do people react after that, because they knew this song was popular. So if it would be only the popularity of the song, right, this guy should go up in the number of downloads that they had, right, or actually even should increase in the number of downloads as this in the same way it increased before. While the song that was not that popular in real world, right, in real life, should go in the other direction. So here you see this is sort of how it looked like, right? So they had a whole bunch of subjects here, and then they made a cut. So they knew that the first, now in the one axis you have the number of downloads, and then on the x-axis you have how many people actually rated on this stuff. So you see as more people kind of rate on stuff, more, songs get more downloaded, the number of downloads increases for all of the songs. And then you see the highest rated song, that was sort of, the song up there, that's sort of the number of downloads for the best song here. Right? So that people like most. While at the lowest line, that's sort of the increase for the number of downloads for the song that people like least. Right? So this is sort of how it goes. And then they flipped it around. Then they kind of artificially changed in the social influence condition the number of downloads associated with this song at the top and the number of downloads associated with the song at the bottom. And this is what happened. This is what happened where they actually compared it to a scenario where they didn't change it. So first of all, let's look at the solid line. That's sort of just how it evolved further on when they didn't change anything. They just let it run. That's sort of the control condition here. But then they had these inverted worlds. Where exactly the same song here. So this is sort of the song number one. But from this moment on and in this condition here, they told people that it was the worst song. Right? They told them that instead of the first song, it was the song 48. In the download hit list. Yeah? And that's sort of how, from that moment onwards, the number of downloads evolved. So you see this line here is much lower than this line. Yeah? So that means when you tell somebody that something is bad, actually people, in this case, didn't download it that much anymore. Right? So people reacted to the information that they were given here about other songs. And the same thing in the other direction. Yeah? Here we have sort of the song that was sort of the least popular, and when they didn't change the world, it just continued to be the least popular song here. But then in this inverted world scenario, they kind of gave this song artificially the number of downloads that this song here actually had. Yeah? And this is what happened. So this song skyrocketed in terms of downloads. So it went up. So this song actually became much more popular by people telling them that it was popular. Self-fulfilling prophecy. So the same thing for the second and for the other songs. I showed you the extreme, the first and the last. Now there's the second song and the second from the bottom. Why similar pattern unfolding. So inverting the downloads here of the songs made the artificially highly appreciated songs receive more downloads. Right? They got, because people thought that kind of they were highly appreciated, they actually became highly appreciated. And the same thing in the opposite scenario as well, that those songs that were lowly appreciated artificially received lower downloads than compared to when they were actually had their right appreciation. Okay, so that's another example. Let me quickly walk you through some terms and conditions, or why self-fulfilling prophecies occur. That's something that Michael Biggs writes about in his paper that you guys had to read for today. So there he talks about two questions that we should answer. Why do people have false beliefs and behave according to them? That's sort of a good question. And why does a specific behavior subsequently fulfill the original belief? That's sort of to how can we unravel the myth of the self-fulfilling prophecy here. Okay, let's jump into the first question. So why do people have false beliefs and behave according to them? And here, Michael basically outlines three possible explanations for why or how that can happen in certain scenarios. Right? First of all, he says maybe there is a power imbalance. Maybe there's a power imbalance in the way that X has power over Y and Y accepts X's expertise. Right? The classic example is I tell a student that the student is stupid, and the student thinks because I'm a professor I know, and then the student starts behaving according to that false belief. Yeah, like there's no effort. It's not worth it doing anything. I'm stupid anyway, and there we are. Right. So that's sort of the classic example how this actually can be. How people can actually accept a false belief because of a power imbalance or because of authority. Second one could be that the costs of making a mistake are just asymmetric. Think of the example of the bank run, right? In the bank run scenario, there's no, I don't know, the cost for withdrawing your money from the bank is low, right? You just need to walk there, you need to take it off, that's it. But there's no real cost involved in here. While if you are wrong, or I don't know, if there actually is a bankruptcy, then not going to the bank and withdrawing your money could be very costly. It could lead to the complete loss of all your savings, because the bank goes bust and there's no bailout, and basically you're screwed. So there's sort of an asymmetry in the costs here. That sort of could be another thing why people behave according to false beliefs that they have. Or people actually could gain something from believing in their false beliefs. The example here is the Ponzi scheme. Sort of, maybe you guys came across this at some point. There's the big scandal in the 1990s, Bernie Madoff. So it's basically this scheme where you tell people, give me your money, I give you 50% interest rate. And you think, wow, that's great. This guy is so clever, let's give him the money. But then I find, I don't know, twice as many people next week, and they give me their money, and with their money, actually, I pay you. And then you do get 50% interest rate, because I got even more money from other people, right? And they gave me their money because they heard from other people who already got the 50% interest rate in the first instance. So that's sort of the Ponzi scheme. And here, people can act based on false beliefs. You can give me your money because you actually can gain something by it. I don't know. The first, at least temporarily, people could have a high interest rate. Okay. So coming to the second part, why does a specific behavior subsequently fulfill the original belief? And that's sort of also a very interesting thing. So because this is sort of where the magical part here is. How does something actually become true that is not true? How can that happen? Okay, so here's this, what I mentioned earlier, this physical reaction that we know, that we can measure, and people measure this kind of stuff. It's called response expectancy. And the truth is, if you tell you that you're stupid, if you tell you that you're bad in math, and then there's an exam and there's a math question, you get very anxious. You get very anxious, and then you freak out. Oh, I'm not good in this. Yeah. And then studies show that this actually degrades performance. So there we are. So when somebody tells you that you are bad in something, don't believe in them. Yeah? Even if it is true, I don't care. Yeah? Because what happens is you get into this spiral of actually making it become true. So if you're aware of these kind of things, you can play this to your advantage a little bit. Actually, I'm doing this all the time. I'm fooling myself all the time with certain things. Yeah, when I don't understand or anything, I don't freak out about it, because if I do, actually I end up freaking out, and actually then I cannot do it. Yeah, then I really stress out about it. So that's one of those key lessons that you also learn here. You learn so many useful things. But one of the key lessons about surviving university. Surviving university is about that. It's about not freaking out, even when you don't understand anything. And that's sort of where the social inequalities come into play. We know that people from high-class backgrounds, they are just, at the end, more successful with education as well. And it's not because they are clever, it's because they are trained to not freak out. Right? and they deal with these situations in a different way. That's sort of the thing here. So that kind of can lead to a response through this expectancy. Another thing is, and at the other extreme, the behavior might change the payoff structure extremely. Imagine somebody who gets tortured. Yeah? Somebody gets tortured almost inevitably leads to confession, even when the victim knows that he is innocent. Yeah. Or there could be a gap between self-image and the image of others. And that's sort of the thing that I talked about earlier, where they had these experiments with Israeli soldiers, and they showed that when the instructor falsely believed that some students are promising and behaved accordingly, the students felt they're being treated better than they deserved, and then they started putting more effort in it. So you can see we actually can take some lessons out of this here, yeah. And actually, people do use that, in I don't know, management folks, they love these kind of things, yeah. But how can you improve the performance of a team? I'm thinking about how can I improve you guys, and you can use it for yourself as well. So high expectations are the key. Reading for next week, Tuesday, we jump into some stuff that we already talked about before. We'll get into success breeds success dynamics. In the literature, it's also called the Matthew effect, that those who already have a lot tend to get even more, and how this works. Anyway, thanks very much, guys. See you next week.